think it's really helpful for anyone who might be listening. We will listen.
It's time to turn it up a notch. Running up this game, I've been going through a lot. You can see the change. It's different when it comes to us. This is how I feel. This is how I feel. This is how I feel. It's time to turn it up a notch. Running up this game, I've been going through a lot. You can see the change. It's different when it comes to us. This is how I feel. This is how I feel. This is how I feel. Nigga, back it will never change. You being hung dead at the neck. Now we shot in plain sight. And I can't hold down the vomit just like he's done with the nonsense. Losing all our leaders is messing around with my conscience. Honestly, it's baffling. Kaepernick is ridiculed. When a black man put his hands up, they still shoot. I don't know about you. Me, I'm sick and tired. Days of our lives got my soul on fire. Days I can't walk.
Andrea, can you hear us?
I can wear a lot.
Seeing if Andrea can hear us.
Peace, we just want to claim. Get color black, we the same, but we not. This is how I feel. It's time to turn it up.
And does she want to say something, or does she just kind of want to be in the?
Andrea, do you have are you going to give any input, any updates next time?
Here's your clip.
Andrea, you talking to Andrea?
Yes.
Actually, Andrea, if you want, if you don't want to talk, but you can also use your chat.
Of work. I like to call it technology of organizing, because we are at a period of history where the students, once again, Black students, white students, all young people who are thinking and want to see justice are rising up. Everybody know we need a united front to win.
Man, welcome back to KCBZ Radio, Situation and Circumstance. We're here. Before we get into organizing and what organizing looks like, we have a pastor with us. We have a couple of educators with us. We have people who work for the school district with us as well. But before I hop into that, one person did not get to give us an update on his last 2 or 3 months, and that's Classic. I know you work with kids as well. I know you're an educator. How have you been affected over the last 3-4 months personally, as well as what you have not been able to do for your students, your extended family?
I think it felt better asking that question than being asked. Because so first of all, I think I was skeptical about the COVID part of it, but I was also trying not to be, I didn't want to be one of those people who were being told something is happening, like a hurricane or something, and then you were being warned and you're like, that's nothing, it's not for real. It's how that one guy says, it's fake news. So there was part of me, that felt like that, but I didn't want to be. I consider myself with a reasonable amount of intelligence, and so I said, well, you know what, I better take it serious. And then as we continued to go, it's became more and more scary to me, because now you have someone saying, open things back up, and even with that, it's like, well, why would we open something back up if we were taking precaution when it was this amount of people that had died from it? Then why would we wait till it has gotten increasingly worse and the numbers have doubled or tripled in some cases, and then say, now everyone go out and be free and don't wear a mask if you don't feel like it? Yeah. And so that part scares me more. And then specifically because I am a diabetic and I am in that age bracket of those who to some degree have higher risk. And so, yeah, that makes me a lot more nervous. So I'm really scared in terms of the COVID part of it. And interestingly enough, I'm not scared of the revolution part of it, because that's something that's a long time coming and needed. And where I have been fortunate in dealing with this, kind of like what Kels was saying, is needing Kels Key rather was needing to do something, so I'm already an activist and all these things, but I needed to get back to work. And fortunately for me, with the company and organization that I work for outside of this, Soul Shop, Soul Shop has addressed this racial issue by putting out content about to make it easier for people who are non-African American to have the conversation about racism and stop running away from that word. And so make it easier to understand things like racism and protest. And so you imagine kids are needing to, some of them for the first time, these words are being defined for them. And unfortunately they have to be, because it's what they're seeing. It's what's happening.
Yeah.
And also even things like privilege and all these things. So that's been therapeutic for me to do that. And then of course, being on this show certainly is helpful, to be around loved ones and to be able to kind of just vent some of the things. I've been back and forth. I've cried. I've gotten so angry that there wasn't enough stopping and breathing to help me down from that level of anger with George Floyd and everyone behind that and in front of that, and experiencing some of those things myself, except obviously death. And so, yeah, it's a scary ride at a horrible, unsafe amusement park for me.
Yeah.
But I do see light, and I'm almost scared I'm not even sure what the light is, other than what my soul tells me it is. So I don't know if that answers it, but yeah,
man,
scary.
Do you guys get exhausted? I mean, for the work
Yes.
that you guys do, we have a pastor here, and he said that this is the first time in his whole time of pastoring that he felt like, wow, I got to check myself. Like, I thought I've been loving, I thought I've been guiding, and this is it. An activist, an active activist, Todd with the NAACP. How do you deal with the exhaustion if you feel it?
So I didn't want to stop the pastor. I wanted the pastor to go first if he wants to.
I'll go ahead. I'll go after you.
But honestly, what I do, aside from prayer, is I do things like this. And I'm reminded by people who are constantly pushing, because that strengthens me. It lets me know that I'm not alone. And it also lets me know that there's other people going through it. And then, since I work with our youth and college unit, which, used to be president of, when they call me and ask me questions, or one of the young ladies reached out and said, hey, I want to participate in the protests. I think that's what it is. By staying connected to other people who are grounded in this idea of pushing the movement and who are grounded in an idea of changing things, then I think that's what strengthens me. Mm-hmm. And then, you know what? I got to call people like you and say, hey, how does this sound? Mm-hmm. How's my reaction? Because I think what ends up happening in situations where we have a pandemic and we have times of extreme sorrow is we begin to close off inadvertently. And by doing that, I think that's how we become, unfortunately, desensitized to things. But by staying connected to other people, that's really how I've been able to kind of deal with it.
I like that.
Itself gets you tired though. Like the fact that we're so in deep, right? Like we're so in too deep that we surround ourselves with fighters. Is there an escape? Do you ever feel like you need an escape, right? Like I'm sure the last movie a lot of us has probably watched was maybe an action movie or a movie that had some type of death in there, had some type of documentary that had some type of violence in it. The documentary When They See Us, I couldn't even watch it because it was just so deep. I got past about 30 minutes and it was just too much for me, right? And then we have the 13th with Ava DuVernay. It's just so much. Is there an escape that anyone would suggest, or escapes even necessary? Is that a distraction, right? Like they're talking about rolling the NBA back in, but a lot of people were against it.
I want to jump on that. And I don't know if I'm going to answer your question, but I honestly think that the reason that we're here is because there's no escape. But here's what I'm trying to say. America has been sitting on their couch, on their bed, at their desk in their home office for 4 months now. We haven't been able to, watch the new series, or we've watched all that. Whatever that was that we were watching, we watched all that. There's no sports to watch. There's no distraction at all. There's nothing to do but to look at the reality of where America is.
Yeah.
And I just think that us being on this social distancing thing, it's a perfect storm that there is no distraction. There should be no distraction. And I'm glad there's not, right? And so because there's no distraction, we've all been forced to look at recording after recording of the same thing or something very like it. Looks the same way, but just another name. And so America is now forced to look at the ugliness of America and the sin of America.
Yeah.
And I think we should keep looking at it. I think we should be disgusted and appalled. And a distraction maybe isn't what we need. And this is my opinion. A distraction maybe is not what we need at all. The reality is, and I'll just say this last thing. As a believer in Jesus Christ, we talk a lot about, we throw like words around like repentance. Repentance is all about a change of your view, right? What are you looking at? I think that in order to stop looking at what you've been looking at, you need to look at your ugliness first. And that's the whole point of what the gospel is really preaching, is like, hey, you got some uglies. Look at your ugly, right? And then look at what's beautiful. Look at who's beautiful. And that ain't it. What you've been doing ain't it. And so I just think America has been slapped in the face. Our mouth is wide open, and we're convicted and we're condemned, and we ought to be.
Wow.
You did not say slapped in the face and your mouth was wide open if you didn't paint a picture with that. And what I love that you said, if I can just touch on, I love that I asked, including a couple of my friends on this call, or at least one, I asked the question and you answered it, but I had asked the question. I said, well, what happened this time in this video that hadn't happened in, speaking of course of George Floyd, that hadn't happened in the previous videos of all the murders and deaths that made so many people in an uproar now? And I asked that question with my own conceived answer or ideology behind what I thought the answer would be. But I wanted to get that information from and see what other people thought. And the answer that I believe to be closest to the truth is kind of what you touched on, which is like, okay, everybody is forced to keep seeing this thing. Not only that, but if we look at our youth, it's one thing to be stuck in a house and you're 48 years old or 49 years old. I'm one of those ages. I forget myself sometimes. It's one thing to be stuck in there then and not have so much energy loss because I'm a little older anyway, right, as opposed to somebody who is young. And I'm not even talking about the kids necessarily. I'm talking about the 18 to 30 that have been really flooding the streets and doing not alone, but have been doing a lot of these protests. And part of me, even with that, feels like it's that thing of like, we need energy, we need a reason to get out. And I'm not suggesting that they're only getting out because of the energetic, but also suggesting that it's both things. It's okay, this is horrible what happened, but this also allows me to get some energy out while also not being able to hide behind work or sports or any of the things like you mentioned that normally would have been a distraction.
And and I gotta say two things. Kels, we go get Kels, and I apologize to the viewers and listeners, we don't have that many women speakers. We'll be sure to do better at that. But while we do have one, Kels, please give us something.
Okay, so I want to speak to 2 points. The first point is
you were ready.
You'd be ready to run it off.
Right.
The first point is what Anthony just said. Basically, what's the difference? I'm going to respectfully, I'm not going to disagree with you. I'll add to what you said. Not only is it the fact that we are stuck at home and the video was on repeat, but it's also akin to watching Derek Chauvin have his knee on that man's neck, right? George Floyd was akin to watching George Wallace and the 1964 through 68 Birmingham, Alabama jogs, the water hose, the fire hose. It was all of that. It was the helplessness that you feel when you're looking at people being unjustly victimized or brutally attacked, murdered, and you can't do anything about it. And that's what
acts of terrorism.
Sir?
Acts of terrorism.
Yes. And I think that a part of that fueled all of the passion that you saw collectively, not only within the United States, but abroad as well. There is something that speaks to humanity when you see an injustice like that go on, right? That's why we hear all over the place, Martin Luther King, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Because come on, they stripped that man down. And people connected not just because of a Black Life Mattering, but because it was a human being. And we're in the middle of all this, and you mean you mother got the right to kill somebody just like that with no problem? Sorry, I didn't want to curse. But that's where people's heads were. Second thing is, and I'll make this quick, back to what Pastor Carpenter said about not necessarily and his, I guess his point is that we want to stay woke, we want to be woke. That's fine, but you also have to find a way to release, not just for yourself, but then also for the people that you service. So for me, I have to find ways to release, because my clients don't want to meet my insanity. My insanity will not work for them. Also, because back to negotiating spaces, as an educator, one of the things that I do is I talk about the uncomfortable conversations. So I have to make sure that I'm clear and focused, so that, let's say, Jeremy doesn't be offended, nor Paul, and I'm meeting Bruce and Pastor Carpenter and Julius where they're at too. So you gotta be able to work through that. So in order for me to be able to do that, I have to keep myself sane. Now I do two things. First, I live by myself. I blast my Google music, and I'm dancing to Marvin Gaye, or I'm dancing to Kirk Franklin. I'm dancing, I'm having fun, I'm getting a release. Or, and this is my favorite thing, I go to my family's house and I go cook. Right. And I want to, because I like to cook, but I live by myself. I'm not cooking all that food. So I go somewhere and I go myself practical. So, but these are things that I have to do for me, so that I can remember that I am sane, I am living, and I'm not just suffering. I'm not just in pain. I'm not just sad or depressed because of what's happening. I have to stay focused. So I think that while it is natural to say that we have to stay woke, it's also natural to say that you have to stay healthy too, because you are giving to others. In a position where we give to others, we have to take care of ourselves. I'm done. Sorry.
No, you're good. And Paul and Jeremy, because that was good. Paul and Jeremy, how can you, what have it looked like over the past about 2-3 months for you guys, as far as organizing, as far as building relationships or reconnecting relationships that might have slowed down, but have brought themselves back to light due to the current events?
You want to go first, Jeremy?
Well, one of the things I've been thinking about is before the pandemic started, or when the pandemic started, around that time, I was thinking it's like the heart of what's important to me is community building. And it's like I've been doing corporate work and trying to, figure out how I build a more sustainable life for myself. And so, there's the intersection of corporate work and community work, and then as with George Floyd and everything unfolding, it's like around the time when I started thinking that I want to be doing public activations and bringing and bridging differences and bringing people together around community art, then George Floyd happened, and it's like, okay, well, here's where the conversation's at, and like here's where like the collective conversation is. And for me, it's just been a big conversation of the consideration of how do I, like when I look at the community work I'm doing, it's like I'm not trying to capitalize off of it. I'm not trying to build a sustainable business from my community work. It's like I feel a lot more free where I see more corporate success, where I'm like, oh, the community program, that's like the heart and the passion of what we do. And so how do we create, for me, it's been how do we create a structure of community work that is fueling community. And for me, that's been okay, then how do we align with what's happening right now around Black Lives Matter, and how do we, the question for me in the last few days is like, okay, like I see people slowing down. I see people having less conversations. And so how do we use community art to help the like thought that came up today, and I was thinking about what Todd said earlier, was how do we stand together for longer, and how do we have more endurance to not just let the conversation drop off. And like everybody, you know, I hear folks talking about like, it's like, oh, like what does racism and anti-Blackness look like in Latinx communities, in Chinese families, like all the different versions coming up. And so for me, it's just been asking a lot of questions of like, and like, are my intentions straight up, asking myself questions around like, what's my place, and like, and it's like, and where am I, and like, where are things getting blurry, and keeping it really clear and looking at that voice, and seeing where I'm like, oh, there's a way that we can use art to connect people, to inspire, to energize people, to bring together different stories, and see the diverse community that's moving something forward. But also, it's like, you know, connecting resources. There's so many important resources for all these different communities coming out. And it's like, well, how do we be connectors? And so for me, it's just like, how do we be connectors, and how do we keep learning on how to do better work with the community stuff, and how does that work with what we're doing in the corporate world?
I got you. I dig it. Much appreciated. Paul?
Yeah, I think this is a really, really interesting time for organizing. I just want to echo something Kels Key said about self-care, and that, you know, capitalism commodifies bodies, right? And also separates our minds from our bodies, and kind of really undermines self-care. And I found myself mid-COVID, after burning myself out volunteering on the Bernie Sanders campaign. I took my first time for self-care in a while. I went on hikes, I cried, I reestablished a relationship with cannabis, I found prayer again. And I did that for a month and really shut myself off from the news. And then pretty much right when I got back into the swing of things is when the George Floyd murder and activism happened, protest happened. And I was able to show up for that because I took that time for myself. And I was able to like lean in and show up on the streets because of that time. And I think that I really resonate with Adrienne Marie Brown, you know, emergent strategy, et cetera, that, you know, there is something radical about self-care. And I think in the white community, self-care very quickly turns into comfort. And so anything uncomfortable is anti-self-care, which is incorrect. Like, we have self-care so we can lean into discomfort better. And I think a big movement for the white community specifically, if they want to show up as anti-racist, is to like practice leaning into discomfort. And so with organizing, it's been really interesting in this situation. My activism is in coalition mobilizing white people in the anti-racist movement. And so
say that again.
It's been interesting. My activism is focused on mobilizing white people in the anti-racist movement through showing up for racial justice, which is a national organization, SURGE, that works in partnership with community leaders of color, organizations of color, to dismantle white supremacy. So it's been interesting this time to see like my mom waking up and my dad being like, oh, what's up? And then like other white people who I've been talking to for years, like something clicked. And I think, you know, it's in part, yes, the video was just so raw and so human. And then also like the last 5 years and the last 5 decades and the last 5 centuries of abolitionist and anti-racist activism that's been happening, that leads to these bigger and bigger upswellings. And so I think a big move here is, for white people, I believe the move is to hold space for other white people as they wake up through their process of guilt. There's this huge upswelling of white guilt happening, which is part of the process towards allyship, which is when they realize, oh, this is real. Whoa, I am culpable. Whoa, I benefit from this system. Whoa, and all of this guilt happens, and it's not on people of color to hold that guilt. So when like people of color have their sacred rage and their anger, and they like rightfully so, like it's not on white people to also have that anger towards white people. It's on white people to be unshakable and calm with other white people, so that that rage has a space, but also so that white people can be ushered deeper into their analysis and deep into their activism. And so I'm personally passionate about maintaining that space to kind of steward people deeper into their knowing and their learning, which is a journey for me as well. But I think that's where I'm at. Yeah.
See, these are my friends right here. This is my support system. I don't know if it was you, Julius, or who it was that said, surround yourself with strength and with. I'm certainly not saying it the way that it was said, but the feeling that I got from it was like, surrounding yourself with support. Mm-hmm. And it can look so many ways, and everybody's need or what support looks like for each person is not going to always be the same. Mm-hmm. I have something I want to read, and I want to be interested in getting a couple of opinions on this.
Can I tap in just before you read that? Can I tap in real quick?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you. I appreciate it. Eric B here. I just wanted to kind of speak to what we were saying about making sure that we are using self-care, but also making sure, I believe, I don't want to lose perspective of what Pastor Carpenter was saying in the sense of keeping the burners on, right? And I feel like it is important for us to take self-care individually, right? As we go through this, but collectively, what I was hearing him say is we can't let up. Yeah. And this is not a time for us to let up, because what happens is it's almost like a relay race. Like if you want to take a breather, but make sure you pass that baton to somebody that's running while you breathing, right? Like don't like everybody just stop and breathe at the same time. And I say that soul shop pun intentionally, right? Like everybody don't stop and breathe at the same time. Because that is we have to know that history has shown us in the system that it will wait us out. Mm-hmm. It will wait for us to get tired together. So yeah, we got to pass the baton, but it will also wait until we stop and then go right back to the same old thing. So we can't let the burners off. We have to continue to make sure that we're keeping it in the face every single day. And if today you need to take a break, let someone else know so that they're making sure that they're saying it on their station, or that they're in their cars, or they're talking to their friends, or every day we have to just keep the burner on so we don't let this thing die out, because it can. And history's shown that if we let it die out, the system will let it die out. And that's not what we got to do. We can't do that. We got to keep the fire lit.
I agree.
Once again, you're here at KCBZradio.com. That was Eric B. I don't know if the DJ / engineer / visionary / I can add a lot of dots to that. This has been great, and we're not done yet. And so we're going to jump right into this. And when we come back, we're going to specifically talk about how the individuals on here, what we're willing to do while right here on this show, what we're willing to do that is going to contribute to organizing. And I have a few ideas with that. When we come right back here, Situation and Circumstance, KCBZradio.com, baby.
Money, yeah. Up your money. Now down your money. When they spend funny money. I want a different dog. I tell her, Patriots. Jordan, money on top of money. I turn a little in a couple mil. I need to make some dirty money. Wash it down, make it clean. Life sweet, must be honey. Investing in some properties. Our money on top of money. Dollar bill. Couple grand to $1 million to $1 billion. Interest for your grow up on my cheese. Then me turn the billion in a trillion. We talk things like this. Top up me account like phone credit. If I not talk money, me no answer. I'ma like spend my own money. Dog with no big sponsor. Our money on top of money. but turn a little in a couple mil. And if you make some dirty money, what you do? Wash it down, make it clean. Life sweet, must be honey. Investing in some properties. Our money on top of money. Dollar bill.
How'd you find this song, Classic?
Invest it, let's squander. I will not make certain decisions because of anger. We lose faith.
You know, sometimes I'm a fan of some people, and other times I just get lucky. I'm looking for something specific, and then I usually try to look for underground more so than mainstream, unless it's just a little, like I just love the hell out of it. But I was looking at this one, trying to find a song that was talking about money, but talking about it in light of in some different lights than just
investing in
talking
some
about
properties. Money on top of money.
Like how he
Dollar bill.
How do you say his name? Jamil?
I think it's Jamiel.
Jamiel.
Right. But I'm actually sure that people are probably calling him Jamil, which my brother's name is Jamil, but yeah. But they're not messing up their name and calling Todd.
$50 in interest, what you gonna say?
No.
You gonna say what?
No.
And why you gonna say no? They call me Wall Street because I teach all of the financial classes here at San Quentin. And I've been teaching financial education for about 10 years now. I am in prison for participating in a robbery murder. And I was sentenced to 54 years to life in prison for that crime. And I've been incarcerated now for 22 years.
Yeah, that was, well, first that was Jamiel, Money, and then that clip was Curtis Carroll, known as simply as Wall Street, doing time in San Quentin. The reason I put him on there is because, you know, we can be in a lot of uncomfortable situations and we still need not only an outlet, but I'm reminiscent of thinking about my friend Paul here many months ago, maybe even a year or so ago. I liked his aspect of money being energy, and not to say, you know, I don't know if that was Paul, I don't know if that was your original concept or not, but it didn't matter. When you said it, it hit me a certain way because, you know, I have this other feeling of like money being the root of all evil, and I remember my friend Eric explained to me, I was quoting the Bible. I was saying, yeah, it says it's easier for a camel to walk through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into heaven. And so I took that as like, right, like, oh, so right, chasing money is bad. Now this was a long time ago, but I thought it was bad, and so he kind of got me straight on that. I know a few listeners probably are like, yeah, that's what I thought too. It meant that. I kind of want to let you explain what you told me it meant, Eric, in terms of it being this. Well, you want to explain that really quickly? That it's easier for a camel to walk through an eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into heaven.
All right. I heard you say it, but I didn't hear what you asked.
I'm sure I could have asked Pastor Bashan that too, but since you were the one that explained it to me, I was like, let me just give it to the person who explained it to me.
What did you say exactly?
You were explaining to me, if you can do it, just your quick version of, remember I was talking to you about it's easier for a camel, how the Bible says it's easier for a camel to walk through the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to get into heaven. And I was explaining
yeah.
Those kind of thoughts. I was thinking that was more related to money in a different way than what it actually meant. And I was wondering if you could give us a quick.
Just when Yeshua was speaking on that, when Christ was speaking on that, there was an actual eye. The needle was actually these mountains that they had to travel through, and they were bumpy and they were rocky, and they had to use camels to go through that, and it was hard for camels to travel through that way. And so it was more of a parallel saying it's easier for a camel to get through the eye, which was the passageway through the needle, which was the name of the passage between these mountains, than it is for a rich man to get into heaven. And it does not mean that a wealthy man can't get into heaven. It's just a matter of where you put in the priorities of your wealth. Do you put your wealth before God? And if you, I mean, well, don't give me. See, me and Mr. Carpenter we could turn up on this one, but you don't want us to.
Go ahead.
When I seen his face, I was like, "Oh, we could get lit tonight." Yeah. Nah.
So, and here's why I bring that up more specifically, is because I know earlier we talked a little bit about maybe we touch on Black supremacy. I also had this quote and a few other things I wanted us to get to, but this conversation has been so delightfully full that you know it's our show, so if we want to omit some stuff, then we can do that. And so the reason I wanted to get to that point is what I'd like to do now is have us individually speak on. So what is we have been told that we need to organize. I can't remember a time when that wasn't said, because I can't remember a time when there wasn't inequality and lack of equity. And so I've been hearing that. What I'm wondering is not how do we organize in this way of how do the people outside of this call organize? How do we organize that are on this call right now? What does organizing? What can we offer that will help us continue to organize? And if somebody, I'd like to jump in and offer that question first to Todd. Is Todd still with us? I don't know if I see his name, and I may have just called him by the right name, and then now he's not here. And so let's go to Julius.
Well, first things first, I'm a student. I'm a student, man, and I'm on shoulders, on giant shoulders. So I'm just trying to listen. I'm just trying to learn. I think the first most important thing is to learn. Is to unlearn. It's to unlearn bad behaviors. It's to unlearn stagnant mentalities. To unlearn white supremacy. We have all been brought up in a white supremacy domain, patriarchy and sexism and capitalism. So I think the most important thing is to get in those books and get into those teachers, those experts who might not call themselves experts, but those leaders. And that's the only thing that I would say right now. Because I'm a student, man. So the first most important thing I'm gonna say for everyone to do is just to unlearn and unpack those chains that we have on our head, those chains that we have in our heart. And as soon as we do that, then I think we can move our bodies, because we can't move our bodies if our mind is still stagnant.
Okay. And then how about we do this in a basketball way, and you pass it to someone.
And before I pass it, I want to I think if you do have one, to suggest the book, to recommend a book that we can all read, or a TED Talk, or any type of educational thing that we can all that we can just read or listen to. And the first I'll say is Malcolm X Speaks. That would be my main one for I would recommend. And then I'll throw the lob to Pastor.
All right. Am I unmuted? Yeah, I am. I don't know. How can we organize? I think that Kel's Key, man, struck a nerve when she was speaking, and she started talking about the babies. In fact, me and her just kind of chatted a little bit on the side, just preparing to have a conversation. I didn't realize we were going to do this. In my mind, I was thinking, okay, we can't let that go. I can't let that go, because I think God spoke through her to me. Yeah, our kids. So I think our kids are this is definitely an unprecedented time. And I think this is a great opportunity to invest in their lives like never before. And I'm wondering, I don't know the answer, but I'm wondering how we can brainstorm to help these children out. And here's what I'm thinking. At least in many parts of America, many kids are not going back to school in a traditional setting. And so that could be problematic to think that, that a kid is going to be asked to learn at home in an environment that may not be conducive to sitting at a desk for 6 to 7 hours, knowing that we do our homework at the kitchen table, right? Like we used to be at the kitchen table, or and there may be all kind of stuff going on in the house. So my thing is this, and the other part of that is every parent's dream is for their kid to finally bring home some homework that they can't help them with anymore, right? And so for some of us, that happens before others, which is great. It don't matter what age it happens at. I just think that we can help parents. I think a parent, even though a kid may bring home homework that they can't help them with, they can provide an environment in which their kid can learn in. And I think parents have to learn to do that. And so I think in a way, we can probably put our resources together, our thoughts together, and really come alongside some parents and pockets of communities to really do some things. So I don't know the answers, but I got questions about that. And I'll just tell you one of my ideas for me in my little small town of Barstow, California. We're thinking about buying kids little desks, little workstations to where they have a space to sit for 7 hours while they're doing virtual work online on a Chromebook, as opposed to sitting on the edge of their bed or sitting at the kitchen table while the TV is being, turned up, that type of thing, and get them some little ear pods and trying to get them used to maybe studying to music so they can block out whatever else is going on in the house because, Paw got the TV on or something. I don't know. So our thing is to really try to partner with families to help figure this out. Because if we don't, then these kids are going to have, they're going to be way behind. And there are many people who wouldn't mind that, just put it that way. So I just think that that's one way we could collaborate.
This is going to come back to us too. Go ahead and thank you for that. Go ahead and pass the ball to anyone. And I do ask whomever the ball is passed to, we are really close to time. So go ahead and give us, sorry to shorten your answers, but go ahead and give us like kind of 45 seconds about.
Okay, so let me pass the ball. Let me pass the ball. I don't have a book, but I pass it to Kel's Key.
Hi. Right, 45 seconds. That's cold. All right, here we go. There's two things very quickly that I think that you can do. First of all, recognize that you have a platform and you have a space. So if you want to create a safe space for students to study, you can look at maybe making or transforming your church into a temporary study hall, putting in place reinforcements to say that they are 6 feet apart, creating a safe study group where you see people in a like mind doing the same thing allows them a chance to make it through a difficult, maybe 7-hour day, if that's what they're going to be doing. I don't know how the schools are going to be doing it. I heard that they're going to basically try to break it up. The other thing is that you break it up. So they don't have to study for 7 straight hours. And one thing that I'm a huge advocate of is that you have, that there's other ways to learn. So get creative. I don't know where Paul is, but I'd be right out there. Maybe the learning lesson is taking them to that McDonald's in Barstow, right? And you're taking them because that's like a historical landmark. Is that right? That's where you're at in Barstow?
Yeah.
Knowing that, B-Town.
I'm sorry. Oh, my bad. Okay. Excuse me. That's like 30 seconds. Hold on. So then, but the basic thing is to just you have to get to know the students. And I agree with you with working with the parents, but many parents, some parents, especially in urban areas, have limitations themselves. And so you kind of have to figure out what it is that the parent has and then what they can provide to the table. They can contribute. And trust me, even though they may have limitations, they still want to contribute because they are invested in their child's education. It's just that so many doors have been slammed in their face that they feel like it's helpless. So you got to remove that barrier for them.
Thank you, Kel. Speaking of slammed, go ahead and slam dunk the ball to the next guest who will try their best.
Lateral move over here to Jeremy. Hi, Jeremy.
Hey, Cap.
Can't hear you.
You there, Jay?
Definitely a big nature advocate for the healing and self-care. Anthony and I went to a river and God, that was good. And then I think, you know,
there this weekend.
just can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
And just as we came on this call, you know, Todd was talking about this moment being something that helps give him fuel, connecting with people, recognizing that we're together. And I think the work that you do with families and kids, Anthony, is like they need that stuff right now. They need to be able to have conversations, connect, talk about their emotions, talk about their struggle of not being in school and feel together in that process when they're distant. And so I think leveraging our power as organizers and learning how to build more close, emotionally safe spaces virtually is like a really creates more access for community in a lot of different ways. And so I think bring Anthony into your school and family.
Nice quadruple supportive suggestions there. Like, yeah, bring me in. And I think we have one wonderful person left. Paul?
Cool. Hey, everyone. Personally, I will be, I do believe in education. I really appreciate what Julia said. And I'll be helping to facilitate like study groups for people who want to dig deeper into like anti-racist learning and learning the history of colonization, capitalism, exploitation, and how we all, how we fit into it and what our role can be to undo it. And so I think there are two ways that I see that coming through. One is connection, you know, like division within the working class division, all sorts of divisions are put onto each other. And then that's why we say, like, talk about the other, like these people across the aisle, these people who aren't politically aligned with me, like those people who act that way. And I think that whenever we connect, whether it's cross-class, cross-race, cross-gender, whenever we connect, we see the humanity and build empathy, and then are able to watch a video and realize that we see ourselves in that video. And then the other one is learn through action, whatever that is. It could be talking to a family member. It could be like making your first phone call to your council member. It could be anything, just, like the praxis, like the learning through practice and then learning again through that is how I see myself showing up. And I saw Eric mention a book, so I'll mention a resource. I mentioned it, Emergent Strategy, Adrienne Marie Brown. Just like my discovery of like Black feminist thought and like speculative, especially in like sci-fi and speculative fiction, has been really crucial for me in like starting to depattern myself. So really feel that.
Ooh, you said emerge and strategy?
Emergent strategy.
Emergent strategy.
It's been really helpful for me.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank all of you for your contributions to this, for your contributions to the show today. And I was really intending on being real intentional in making sure that we exchange whatever information is needed to further these conversations outside of just the platform we're on now. It dawns on me that when I think about there's someone here who particularly does mosaics and art pieces that contributes and donates money from those things to Black Lives Matter. What would it look like to have this individual collaborate with Bashan, and we're in two different spaces of California? What would it look like to have Paul and Kels connect in a different way? And so as we close this out, I want to invite everyone to reach out to me. You all have my information, or you can reach out to Eric, but reach out to me. And if you want someone's information or phone number, and of course I'll ask that person, because I was raised that way, if it's okay with them, and then I'll go ahead and make that exchange. But that's what I want. That's for me. My answer to the organizing is we have the conversation, but we always have the conversation. We are taking steps by ourselves and then sometimes in groups, but here we have a fantastic group that we all can benefit on and find out more things about, and then go further even with that. We can figure out what the names of these books are that keep popping up on the screen that we may not have in a minute when the conversation is over. We can make sure we give all of that. I'm sure Eric has copies of the chat anyway. And so having said that, please do reach out to me to find out more or get further information. I see that some people are already sharing their information on there. If you have time, take a picture of that, get that. And as always, and Julius, thank you so much. I have never been able to ask for a better co-host, or I don't even like saying the word co, I like just saying another host, but then it's like, is there only one host? Anyway, thank you all. Bashan, one of my oldest and dearest friends, and Jeremy and Paul and Kales K. Just thank all of you. And Eric Bryan, of course. Todd was on here with us as well. Thank you. And as always, we promise our listeners that, well, we will continue to make beautiful mistakes. We embrace the opportunity afforded by our ancestors to speak, whether right or wrong, weak or strong. We be learning humans working on liberation and scaffolding a meaningful and fair existence for all. Until the next time, my netches, uhuru. See you next time. Looks like we are clear. Talk to you